welcome back to Baking with Love. I'm Carolyn Stella, aka Stella, coming to you from the new, improved PEG TV kitchen studio. And today I'd like to share with you my recipe for fruity spice cake squares. Ever heard of them? No, because I made it up. They're really fruitcake cookies. But if you say fruitcake, people run for the hills. Studies show that about 89% of Americans identify as fruitcake haters. Only 11% fruitcake lovers. So I'm rebranding and I'm going to change that statistic this holiday season. So fruity spice cake, it's going to be all the rage. So let's get started with our recipe. And also, let me tell you that December 27th is National Fruitcake Day. So if you do make these for Christmas, save a couple because they're going to be so popular, they might be gone on the 25th, and you want to have a couple around to celebrate National Fruitcake Day on December 27th. So fruit, let's see. We're going to use about 3 3/4 to 4 cups of dried or candied fruit for this recipe. Now, I'll tell you what I use, but you can mix and match to make 3 3/4 to 4 cups. So I started with 3/4 of a cup of dried currants, but if you don't have currants or you want to substitute regular raisins or golden raisins, that would be fine. 3/4 of a cup of dried dates or dried figs. They're going to be chopped. Everything's going to be kind of bite-sized. Today I'm using the dates because one of my official taste testers seems to like the date recipe a little bit better. So this one's for you, Laura D. 3/4 of a cup of dried pineapple. 3/4 of a cup of candied or glacéed cherries. These are not maraschino cherries, so do not substitute maraschino cherries for this recipe. It seems like that's one of the things that people say ooh about fruitcake was the candied cherries. So if you want to use a little bit more of one of the other fruits, that's fine. But I really like them, especially for the little pop of red color that it gives the cookies. So 3/4 of a cup of candied cherries, also diced up. 1/2 cup, so this is a little bit less, of candied orange peel. And if you can't find it or don't want it, you can substitute chopped dried apricots. And 1/4 cup of crystallized ginger. Now you might remember from my bumpy pumpkin bread recipe, crystallized ginger is one of the secret ingredients. I highly recommend using that 1/4 cup, but if you don't have it, you can, again, bump up some of the other measurements, and then you can add a little powdered or dried ginger in with the other spices. And this is an option. Some people say it wouldn't be fruitcake without nuts. 3/4 of a cup of toasted chopped pecans. We talked a lot about pecans last month with our pecan pie squares. I am not going to be using the nuts today, but again, you can mix and match, and all these things will be added to the batter later. So what do you have to do before you get your fruit ready to add? You have to macerate it. Macerate is a word from Latin, macerare. Came into English in about the 1500s, and it means to soak or to steep. So once you have your 3 3/4 to 4 cups of a combination of these fruits, you're going to pour 1/2 cup of some kind of spirits. So in this one, I used 1/2 cup, with love, of brandy. You can also use bourbon. You can also use dark rum. I didn't have any dark rum, so this is amber rum. So 1/2 cup of any of these in with the chopped fruit, or if you don't want to use alcohol at all, you can use 1/2 cup of orange juice or 1/2 cup of apple juice. And then you're going to let it steep. Now, if you're doing the speed method, you can do this in about an hour. If you're going to do it with love, our way on this show, you're going to do it overnight. So it takes a little planning, but if you do it in an hour or a little over an hour, you would take this bowl with the liquid, whether it's brandy, bourbon, rum, or orange juice. You would microwave it for about 90 seconds on high and give it a spin and then let it cool off. And when you add it to the batter, you would only add max 1 to 2 tablespoons of the liquid if the liquid is not all absorbed. But when you let it sit overnight, all the liquid is absorbed and all the fruits are plumped, and you've got this delicious combination of flavors that we're going to add to our batter. So that's the fruit part. Now, let's talk about the spice part. So I'm going to move a few things and we'll get to our dry ingredients. So the original fruitcake came, they suppose, around the time of the ancient Romans. It was a combination of things like pine nuts, raisins, pomegranate seeds, barley mash, and honeyed wine. And they made these little cakes that had a really great shelf life and were pretty dense, so they were great snacks to have in battle. So ancient Romans, Roman warriors used them as like the first ever energy bar. So you hear that, triathletes? I know how you are about race nutrition. You might want to give this a try. So in this bowl, for our dry ingredients, I already have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And to that, we're going to add half a teaspoon of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of salt, and now again, it's called fruity spice cake. So here comes our spices. A quarter of a teaspoon of ground cloves, a quarter of a teaspoon of cinnamon, a quarter of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, an eighth of a teaspoon of allspice, and an eighth, this was a quarter, so I only put half, an eighth of a teaspoon of mace. So that's all of our spices, and then we're just gonna swirl this together. We've got our fruit, we've got our spices. Now let's get to what's gonna glue it all together. And that is butter. So in this bowl, before you got here, I semi-melted, it's a little warmer than room temperature, 2 sticks of unsalted butter. And to that we're going to add 2 cups of firmly packed dark brown sugar. And we're going to give that a whirl. You can use your stand mixer if you'd like. I've got my hand beater right here. And we're going to cream these two together. And I'll also tell you that in the 1700s, in puritanical England, fruitcake was outlawed for being sinfully rich. Thankfully, the law was repealed. And for a long time, fruitcake has been a traditional wedding cake in England. In fact, Kate Middleton and Prince William had it at their wedding. And in the 1800s, there was a weird custom that unmarried wedding guests in England would take a piece of wedding fruitcake and put it under their pillow at night, and supposedly they would dream of who they were supposed to marry. And it still is a fruitcake fruitcake is still a wedding cake in New Zealand and Australia as well. All right, we're going to add 2 eggs, one at a time. This is a large egg at room temperature, and beat it up a little bit more. So fruitcakes came to America with the colonists, and they were popular because they realized that candying fruit or coating it with sugar helped preserve it when fresh fruit wasn't available. Another large egg at room temperature, so one at a time, and beat that up. And now we're going to add 2 teaspoons of real vanilla extract and a quarter cup of molasses. And this is a little sticky, as you know, so I'll probably have to scrape it to make sure that I get all the molasses goodness out of this measuring cup, which I'll do now. And of course, a heaping cup of love, because it's holiday season and all the love the better. So you could see how much, if I just didn't scrape this, I would have missed out on all that great molasses flavor. All right, we're going to stir that up. I'll scrape down the bowl a little bit, and then it's time to add our dry ingredients. What else can I tell you about fruitcake? In the 1960s, a fruitcake traveled into space with one of the Apollo missions, but it wasn't eaten, so it ended up in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So you've got some famous fruitcake. All right, that's it. Now we're going to add our dry ingredients, which is the flour, baking soda, salt, and all of those nice spices. We'll give that another whirl. southern states seem to have more fruitcake lovers, probably because of all the pecans that grow down there. We talked about that last year. And there's 2 states that are battling it out for fruitcake capital. There is a place in Georgia, I think Claxton, Georgia, is up against Corsicana, Texas. Both of them are claiming they are the capital. One says of the world, and one says of the U.S. And we like world records on this show. The world's heaviest fruitcake weighed in at 619 pounds. Now this one's pretty heavy. I can't tell you how heavy because my kitchen scale only goes up to 5 pounds. I weighed it and it was more than that, and I don't have a bathroom scale. So if you weigh your fruity spice cake, your Stella's fruity spice cake, I hope you'll make this recipe. And if you weigh it, let me know how much. But you might have to go back to the gym because this is some heavy lifting. I'm not kidding. All right, that looks good. I'm just gonna, again, wipe down the bowl. The batter is pretty dense. And then comes our macerated fruit. And that is soaked, in our case, overnight or at least 1 hour until all the liquid or most of the liquid gets absorbed. So that plumps the fruit, and it will also infuse your spice cake with the flavor, whether it's brandy, bourbon, rum, or orange juice. All right, so now we're gonna add this fruit. And we're just gonna, oh, you know what? I'm gonna get those beaters a little cleaner. We wanted all that molasses, and now we want all of our batter. Give that a spin. One more. So also, when it comes to fruitcake fun facts, go. There is an annual fruitcake toss held every year in Manitou Springs, Colorado, at the end of January. So this January 24 will be the 28th annual fruitcake toss, and it's not what you think. It sounds like, you know, people want to throw away their fruitcake because they hate it so much, but it's actually a celebration of fruitcake. There's fruitcake bake-off, there's fruitcake tasting, and then of course the tossing, which last year the guy that won threw it 180 feet. I forgot to mention, well, before you got here, I took a 9 by 13 inch pan. I lined it with foil overhanging the 2 short sides and sprayed it with a little nonstick cooking spray. So that's all set, and that's what we're baking it in. And now we've got our fruit in our batter, and we're gonna give this a good spin. I wanna get every little currant and every little piece of crystallized ginger in there. All right, so you're gonna give this a nice stir. And it adds a little moisture, but again, if you don't do the overnight and you have a little liquid left in that bowl, only incorporate about 1 to 2 tablespoons if you have any brandy or bourbon left. And it is, like I said, it's pretty dense, so you're gonna have to use your muscles to stir that fruit in, and then your muscles to lift up the pan. All right. That looks good, and again, those little flecks of red are really nice from the cherries for our holiday season. So we're going to spread this evenly into our prepared pan and bake it in our preheated 350-degree oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. And again, you have to know your oven. In the middle rack, about halfway through the 20-minute mark, I would probably give it a spin and test it with a toothpick. The old toothpick comes out clean test. And then you'll have to let it cool before we get to our icing. Ugh, I'm telling you, this is stiff. And it's just the way you want it to be. So if it's not stiff, you have to worry a little bit. But it's gonna be such a nice, dense, spicy flavor with all that moist fruit. And if you do use spirits, that little bit of hint. And if you want to use the orange juice, feel free. All right, it's out of there. Let's start moving it around. We want an even layer, all the corners. Keep it on the foil. and we'll get this in the oven. What else? There's a lot of fun fruitcake. Oh, if you call someone a fruitcake, that means they have odd or strange behavior. Another literary reference, we had our macerate. Also, that word macerare had a second definition that meant to waste away by fasting. So you can macerate your flesh, but we're only macerating our fruit. I don't know, you might feel like fasting after all the eating that's going on this holiday season, but you have to save some room for fruity spice cake squares. All right, these will look great on a cookie assortment. If you make a lot of different types of cookies, I'll show you how we're going to dress these up. And it'll be something new, but again, whatever you do, just don't tell them it's fruitcake. Really. All right, so I'm going to give my hands a wipe. We're going to get this in the oven, center rack, 350 for 35 to 40 minutes. And I'm actually going to start my timer over here. And we're going to go into the PEG TV time machine, as we like to do. Use your imaginations and clear off some of this stuff and clear off some of our fruity stuff, and we'll work on the icing. So after it comes out of the oven, you're going to need to let it cool thoroughly. So here's our cooling rack. 35 to 40 minutes later, here's our fruity spice cake, and that needs to cool as well. So you're going to take it out of the oven, put it on the rack, let it cool, and don't make your icing right away because you won't be able to use it until your spice cake is thoroughly cool. You might take it out of the container. I'll do that. Once it is cool, don't do it when it's still warm, but to ice it, you can take it out of the container and let it cool a little bit more. And now we'll work on our icing. Let me bring this over to that side. All right, in this bowl, I have already measured this is my love bowl, 1.5 cups of confectionery sugar. And to that, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of whole milk and 1 tablespoon of the brandy, because that's the liquor that I was using for this cake. If you're not using it, you can just do all milk. You don't have to put the spirit in the icing. And if it's too thick, of course, add a little bit more milk or brandy if you're using it. If it's too thin, you can always add a little more confectionery sugar. You want it to be spreadable, not runny. And then we're going to have to wait again a little bit to slice it. So that's so easy. It might have a couple, if you don't sift it, it might have a couple lumps, and that's okay. And you can use a spatula or offset spatula or spreader. I think I'm just going to use my fork today. Some of it might drip off. Now, in the recipe, it does say if you want to trim it, if you have some edges that rise up like this and you want to have nice even squares, I'm not going to trim, but you're welcome to trim. If you have somebody that eats it plain, I do, then they won't miss the icing, and it'll make your squares a little bit more exact as far as their shape. All right, so remember, this is totally cool, and now you can put your icing on and then just spread it to all the edges. This one has a little bit of a rise, so it's going to kind of pool in the center, and you can just use your fork to pull that around and out to the edges. And like I said, this is going to have to set up. So we're going to have to go into our time machine again and use your imaginations a little bit more, which I know you're good at, on Baking with Love. All right, so you want to have it coated. It might show through a little bit, but we're also going to use some fruit to top it, so you don't have to worry about a little bit of the brown showing through. I got this well, like I said, so there's a little deeper area you can pull from. Yours might be flat. The other one that you'll see in a moment was a little flatter. And it just might depend on your oven. It's okay if some runs over the edge. Again, you might even cut those edges off. And that looks like how the frosting should look. So it's a nice big slab of frosted spice cake at this point. Fruity spice cake. All right, so we'll leave it at that. If some runs over the edge, that's fine. And now we'll go into the future again, about 20 to 30 minutes, and we're ready to slice and decorate. So here we have our icing all set up. And again, we'll just take it out of the pan, see if I can slide it off the foil. No, I can't, so we'll leave it on the foil, and we'll slice it, and we'll decorate it. So again, I'm gonna make these into squares. You know I make a lot of squares, I like squares. Move this over while that sets up. And again, you can decide if you have a platter and you're doing a lot of different cookies, you might make them really little bite size. If you want to make them a little bit bigger, you can. Every once in a while, a little piece of fruit might decide to come off on your knife. You can just, really, it's so moist, you can just, those currents are doing it. You can just smush them back in. And then go around the other side. That one's a little thicker. And again, if you wanted to trim the edges, you could make them perfect squares, but again, this is baking with love, and we think that all those little things are just the love showing through. I might need another row for my platter. All right, now to decorate this, I have some of the candied cherries again, glacé cherries, cut in half, and I have red and green. So you're just gonna press those on. They're a little sticky, and again, they're cut in half. I'm not using the whole cherry. I think especially on this size square, they'd be a little big. And I cut these prior. And then some green. And again, just, you can alternate, and that way if you do a platter of just these, you've got a little variety. If you're making them as part of your assortment, you've got both colors, and of course red and green and white are perfect for this time of year. So they'll be very festive. And again, just don't tell people until after they try them what they really are, or never tell them. But again, I'm really thinking that we can turn this around. Do you know how fruitcake got to be such a joke? In the 1960s, a late night talk show host named Johnny Carson and his sidekick Ed McMahon decided to make jokes about fruitcake, and they would do things like, you can watch it on YouTube, they would do things like put it on a railroad track, put a fruitcake on a railroad track, the train would go off the track, they would have people hit fruitcake with a sledgehammer and have the sledgehammer bounce back, and none of it was true. I mean, he also said there was only one fruitcake and they just keep passing it around year after year. So the joke stuck, and a lot of people after that didn't even try fruitcake. So again, once you get people to try it, I think they're really gonna like it, and this is a way to sneak it in. Just call it Stella's Fruity Spice Cake. Jay Leno, who took over the Tonight Show for Johnny Carson, also made a tradition of kind of joking about fruitcake. He had a little old lady called the Fruitcake Lady who would come on and bake at the holiday season. And there's a really funny episode with her baking with Tom Cruise. So if you want to add to your fruitcake trivia and knowledge, you can definitely check out that episode. Oh, I need a green. And this was a nice red and green platter as well. I did not know that was going to work out just right with a couple for us to try. Let me give my hands another wipe. So there you have it. perfect for the holiday. You've got the festive colors. You've got a traditional holiday treat, and we're rebranding it for 2023, Christmas 2023. And don't forget, December 27th, you can celebrate for National Fruitcake Day. So I'd like to wish you and your family and all the viewers at For Baking with Love and PEG TV a very happy and healthy holiday season. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time on Baking with Love.